Ixalan.
It's time for pirates and dinosaurs. And merfolk.
Oh my.
And
Is there anything else?
vampires.
Oh yeah!
All four of the most notably favorite tribes of Magic coming together once again.
Dinosaurs was a favorite tribe before?
Oh yes, it's been a favorite for years, ever since Alpha Tyrannax first came to light.
I personally am a fan of Trilobite Tribal.
Yes, that is the future. But today we're going to talk about the very near present, which is Ixalan.
Yes. And, unfortunately, you may have noticed that we did not do a review of the previous Magic set.
Hour of Devastation.
And the reason for that is quite simple. Is we were really excited about Ixalan. So we decided to try to get some early information about Ixalan. But this is before everything about Ixalan that you may know is now known. It certainly was unknown to us. So when we went to Ixalan, we got stuck.
We've been stuck for some time.
But we got out. We won't tell you how. We won't spoil the secret of how we escaped. But may have involved a few dinosaurs.
Or hedrons.
Yeah, hedrons. They seem to be like the applied phlebotonym of magic these days. Something strange. It's probably a hedron.
Probably a hedron.
Or a crab.
Yeah, or a crab.
A hedron trilobite.
Hedron trilobite incoming.
But we're here now to review the full spoiler of Ixalan. So we'll start right at the top. We're looking at Mythic Spoiler. We have, as of the time of this preview, they haven't switched all the cards over to their English translations, so we'll be working with the most commonly accepted translation at the time of this filming. And we'll talk primarily about just the cards in a vacuum, because neither of us really plays a lot of Standard at the moment.
But we will be
We
soon.
hear talk of Ramunap Red.
Yep. Very popular.
We know that it involves the color red and some card bearing the name of Ramunap. That is about what we know. Yeah, we don't play a lot of Standard these days. So we're going to look at these cards mostly in a vacuum, and also, of course, as we usually do, with a bent towards the Commander.
I will say, this set has me pretty excited for Standard, though, because some cards in this set will not work in Modern, but will be very fun to play in Standard.
Yes. This is a... This set, I think, overall, as a vibe, has a very kind of a Timmy vibe.
Right.
It has big creatures, big effects, powerful things. Very much this set kind of has a flavor of, look what I just did on the board.
Right.
Not so much in a, look what I have assembled, but I've made this huge play with a big sweeping effect on the board. I can foresee probably very many swingy matches in this Standard, and out of this set in general, is also in Limited. This set, for Limited, is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Because so many things fall into the B category of bread.
Right.
And it's going to be pretty wild. But enough preamble. Let's look at the first card. Let us become enchanted with this set with the enchantment Axis of Mortality. It's a 4 and 2 white enchantment mythic. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may have 2 target players exchange life totals.
So, that's interesting. I don't think we've seen an effect like that for some time. And the effects that we have had have been very expensive, usually sorceries. So the fact that this one's an enchantment and can continually do that, essentially what this is trying to accomplish is punishing your opponent for attacking you, right?
Yes.
They're trying to get your life low in order to kill you, and this says the more you hurt me, the more you're hurting yourself.
This also, because it says may, it does synergize very well with another vampiric enchantment that we will address later.
Yep.
Next we have the obligatory, the ever-present Jace, Cunning Castaway. This, when it was spoiled, there were some leaks Sorry, Professor, by the way. Anyway, there were some leaks, and we could tell that it said Legendary Planeswalker, and we were like,
what is that?
What does that mean? And Wizards has since decreed that they will be merging the Planeswalker rule, or the Planeswalker uniqueness rule, with the Legend rule. So you can have multiple Jaces as long as they are Jaces of different names. Jaces of a different color, as they were. If we see a multicolored Jace, that would be interesting. You could do Nissas of a different color, or a Johnny's of a different color.
That's true. That's true.
But this Legendary Planeswalker Jace is actually pretty darn good.
Anytime you have a 3-drop Jace, it's gonna see play, I think.
Yeah. Or even a 4-drop or less is
Yeah.
usually pretty good. And he's a 3 loyalty for 3, so you're having loyalty equity.
Yep.
His +1, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player this turn, draw a card, then discard a card. So it's 1 or more, so you're not getting it off of every creature.
Right.
But it's still card advantage. Now, he's not protecting himself on the +1, so that is automatically a disadvantage to any Planeswalker. And if you're looking at a Planeswalker, you have to imagine it arriving on an empty board, and can it protect itself? And the answer is, when this Jace ticks up, he can't. But his -2 does help him protect himself a little bit. You create a 2/2 blue illusion creature token that has, when this creature becomes the target of a spell or sacrifice it. I almost said or ability, because illusions usually say that. This does not say that. It says spell only.
Well, which is good, because if it said ability, then his +1 wouldn't work with it very well at all.
Well, that one just says with one or more of your creatures.
Oh,
so
right.
That's not targeting them. But it's still not too bad. It makes a 2/2, but he goes down to 1 loyalty, so you're really leaning heavily on that illusion. As Jace usually leans heavily on his mental abilities.
Right.
Much to his downfall, much to his defeat in the previous set. But his -5 is what's a little interesting. So he creates 2 tokens that are copies of Jace Cunning Castaway, except that they are not legendary. So, in a vacuum, this card's interesting, a little cheeky.
Yeah.
But if you have a way to activate that ultimate quickly, say if you have Doubling Season, now we're straying into our Commander bed. If you have a Doubling Season in play, and you drop Jace Cunning Castaway, he will come in at 6 loyalty. You can immediately ult him for a -5 and make 2 tokens.
And then ult those tokens. And then those tokens ult. And etc., etc. You'd end up with infinite 1 loyalty Jaces.
Yeah. And you could alternate even, making illusions. You could
make an illusion with 1, ult the other.
Mm-hmm. And one of them could tick up to... You just need one of them to tick up to get the looting ability, because you only need that once per turn.
Yep.
And so you could sit a bajillion illusions into play, and if you have any way to give them haste, like your favorite card, Concordant Crossroads.
Concordant Crossroads is fun.
Then... Which is in colors for Simic.
Yep.
So this is a combo that you're going to have to watch out for in Commander Planeswalker decks, because it gives Planeswalker decks... When you had Doubling Season in Planeswalker decks before, let's talk about the changes to that deck archetype. It's nothing to sneeze at, really. Because before, when you went infinite with Planeswalkers, you usually would have to still do a few things to win the game.
Yeah.
This, you would use cameos of both flavors to get like all the cards and do things. But this, you can just win with Doubling Season and this card and anything that grants haste, or if you had like an Impact Tremors or anything that relies on
Impact
creatures
Tremors,
hitting play.
Warstorm Surge.
Yeah, so this is an instantaneous way for Planeswalker decks to win the game if they can give it haste.
Right. Which
is not terribly difficult to do. In any color, I think, but white.
Right.
So that's huge. Let's roll on from Jace. Let's cast him away, and we'll look at Boneyard Parlay, which is a mythic sorcery for 5 and 2 black, so high mana cost. It says exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control, and the rest into their owners' graveyards.
So obviously this has to be a pretty expensive effect, because you're getting up to, sometimes 3, maybe even as many as 4 creatures directly into play from graveyards. So if you're milling your opponent, if you're milling yourself, if you're doing any kind of graveyard strats, it's very expensive, but it's a very powerful effect. I think this is the closest we're going to see to Rise of the Dark Realms for some time.
Yeah, Rise is just too good. And as far... the mana cost is daunting, but if you look at it, if you break it down, it's 5 and 2 black, you're exiling 5 target creature cards from graveyards. Now, they're going to go back to their owner's graveyards, whichever ones you don't pick.
Right.
But you're targeting 5 things, so that's the 5 colorless, and then the 2 mana is paying for the rest of the effect. So it's actually pretty mana efficient, in my opinion, for what you're getting out of it.
And I'm sure that someone will find a way to make it so that this goes infinite somehow. You put certain creatures onto the field that then do other certain creatures, like, the whole Safi Ericstotter Reviarch thing, where if you were to put this in Carador, this could be a way to just win the game.
You'd have to be able to recur Boneyard Parlay in some fashion.
Potentially. Sometimes one of the creatures being on the field is enough.
You'd have to set up in such a way that I don't think you could make it, because you'd have to have multiple E-Witness type effects. And your opponent could always put them all into one pile.
Right.
So you'd have to put them all into play or all into the graveyard, or it would be a little... I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm saying it's an uphill fight.
Right.
And there's probably more efficient ways to...
As for whether or not it'll say play in Standard, I mean, it's possible, depending on the size and strength of what you're getting back, but...
I think if we have a deck that is a control deck, that... It would require the perfect situation, I think. You'd have to have a control deck using black that can stall the game out to this mana, and you'd have to be facing off against a deck that is running big threats like Dinosaurs.
Right.
So I don't see... This is not a main deck card. I see it maybe being a sideboard card for a particular matchup in particular deck archetypes.
Right.
So maybe not.
Definitely feels like it has to be a Mythic, though, considering how strong it can be.
Yeah. The value on this, I'd say, is very conditional.
Yeah.
I
do like that you get to pick the pile, though.
You do get to pick the pile.
And you know what you need.
It's always fun to try to steal things from your opponents.
Yep.
Speaking of which, the next mythic is Rowdy Crew, which is a human pirate that costs 2 and 2 red for a 3/3 with trample, so it's pretty mana efficient. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards at random. If 2 cards that share a card type are discarded this way, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Rowdy Crew.
So that makes it a 5/5 with trample for 4. That's very interesting. I would almost rather you created 2 treasure tokens instead of putting 2 +1 counters on it. But this will synergize well with some of the madness effects from Shadows over Innistrad and things like that. But
and all the
I don't think people really like
cards from...
I don't think people really like discarding at random, though.
It's kind of like... It reminds me of Gamble.
Yeah.
But without the tutoring part, and you have no control whether this is going to be bigger. So it can be a 5/5 trample for 4.
Right.
Can be. And it does let you draw 3, then discard 2, so you are getting 1 extra card.
So you always get an extra.
But you don't control which cards in your hand you're keeping.
Right.
But it's better than like a dead loot card, where if you like have no cards in hand, you draw a loot card, it's dead because you're gonna draw and then get rid of it.
Then immediately get rid of those cards.
So you are getting at least 1 card.
So if you're willing to risk it, or if you have some means of using your graveyard or discarding, honestly, if you're just looking for a dread drop in 4 that just essentially says draw a card, this pretty much does the trick.
It's if you break it down, it's a 3/3 with trample for 4 that says draw a card.
Right.
And maybe
some other stuff.
It might be a 5/5. It might not. You have no real control over that.
Which is fun.
unless your hand is all one card type and you've somehow sculpted the top of your deck to all be one card type.
Right.
But the odds of that are pretty...
You know, you gotta have lands
situational, and why did you work that hard to get this 5/5 out? Now, we have the Implacable Death Lizard.
Yep.
Which is definitely worth doing the work to get out. The Carnage Tyrant is a 7/6 for 4 and 2 green, so it's a 7/6 for converted mana cost of 6. Carnage Tyrant can't be countered, and it has Trample and Hexproof.
Now, I will say this much. 6 mana is the magic number in green. That's where a lot of the very good green threats in Magic exist.
Yes.
And I think this is right up there with them. I mean, of course, this calls back to, you know, Plated Crusher or even Gaia's Cradle, where it seems like they've been kind of toying around with this triangle of, okay, well, does it have Trample and Hexproof? Well, then
Gaia's Revenge.
Yeah, Gaia's Revenge. Then it can be countered. Well, if it can't be countered and it has Trample, then it doesn't have Hexproof, right? We've seen a bunch of large threats that have 2 of the 3, but this is the first one we've seen that has all 3. And that makes it a really serious threat because it dodges all the spot removal, essentially. If you know, you got Terminates. What's that? Unlicensed Disintegration. I'm not sure how much play that's seeing right now, but I mean, it's a good spell.
Oh, it's seeing a lot of play
right?
still.
So, I mean, it dodges a lot of the spot removal. You essentially have to board wipe it or be able to block it enough, which, if you do, you're going to be losing some stuff. Because it's got 7 power, and it's got Trample. So, I mean, this thing is a Timmy player's, like, just dream come true. I mean, honestly, the second I saw this card, I knew I was going to be playing this the whole time it's in Standard.
Oh, yeah. And 6 mana, it really is kind of a magic number. Magic players don't like playing things that cost more than 5. I've heard people say on many occasions that if it costs 6 or more, it might as well cost infinite mana, because in many games you're not going to want to devote that much resources or get to that CMC in your decks, especially as you scoot further towards eternal formats.
Now, it's interesting to note that in this format, it can be pseudo-countered. We do have Unsubstantiate, we do have things that can return it from the stack to the hand.
Yeah, that might be why they felt safe printing a card like this.
Right, because there are answers for it.
There are things to do, but...
In Limited, though, first one to Carnage Tyrant in Limited, pretty much, that's the win almost. I mean, that was the case with Scaled Behemoth. I pulled 1 Scaled Behemoth in pre-release and just 1 off that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let's get a little, we're spending a lot of time on this first row of cards, but they're worth talking about. It's Mythics.
Yep. Mythics probably require the most to talk about.
Oh yeah. So let's talk about, let's hypothesize for other formats beyond Standard. So Commander, I think this is good.
Oh yeah.
It's not like the most insane board altering threat.
Right.
But it's a big mean thing.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about for Modern?
I think this is a little too expensive for Modern. The only 6-drop green creature I've seen in Modern right now that I can think of is Primeval Titan.
Yes.
And Primeval Titan just does
business.
More. Right, it just does more than this card.
Now,
I will say that in Modern, you don't really see a lot of unsubstantiated effects. So,
you see
people
Path,
prefer to run, Path, Mana Leak, Remand, things of that nature, even, Cryptic Command, to where, if you felt comfortable that you could ramp to this guy, he would be a serious threat.
Yeah.
There's not exactly a whole lot of sacrifice-style effects in Modern right now that are seeing play, because there's just more efficient ways of killing things with spot removal.
The one I've seen is, it's from Battle for Zendikar, the white Escalate card. That says target player sacrifices an attacking creature.
Now see, another thing that's going to be a problem for this guy in Modern is hand disruption.
Yes, because they will get rid of him immediately. Thoughtseize or Lay Bare the Heart or anything of the Inquisition. Oh, well, Inquisition couldn't hit him because it's CMC 3 or less. Correct.
But, once they know you're playing him, they're probably going to try to side in something that's going to be able to deal with him.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, they're going to have to deal with him because he dodges all of the removal other than a Wrath.
Yeah. I mean, you do see some Supreme Verdicts.
Yeah, you do see Wraths, but targeted removal, which is a lot of what is run, he dodges it.
So my main concern for him would just be that he's not fast enough.
Yeah.
It takes too long to get him out, and he doesn't he doesn't affect something immediately the way that Primeval Titan does.
If you were running some crazy ramp deck like Elves, I could see him being a decent win condition for Elves. I mean, they already have Craterhoof.
Yeah.
Which is Craterhoof. He's still okay. But it's hard to predict with cards that are, like, not necessarily hugely board affecting, but are very good at dodging removal, because Stormbreath Dragon does see play in Modern, in Skred, and one or two other decks.
Right.
So, just because he's pro-white, so he dodges Path to Exile, and he hits really hard and he's evasive, and this guy is pseudo-evasive in the fact that he's a 7/6 trampler.
Now, I will say it's interesting, they made him Mythic even though he doesn't do anything complex, because he's the complete package.
Yeah, he is definitely the complete package. Let's scroll down to the second row of cards. We've been talking for however long, and we're at the second row of cards. The Wakening Sun's Avatar. Now, this is the definition of a fatty.
Yeah.
He's 5 mana and 3 white, so he costs 8 mana for a 7/7 dinosaur avatar. When he enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all non-dinosaur creatures.
Right. So this is part of a cycle. Dinosaurs are in Naya in Ixalan, white, green, and red, and so each of the 3 colors has their own sun's avatar. And I find it interesting to note that, to my best of knowledge, none of them have any keywords. None of them have trample, none of them have hexproof. So what you've got to understand with this guy can be chump blocked after a certain point. But I will say, when he enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, so that means you can't bring him in off Gishath.
Yeah, I was actually going to make mention of a trend I'm starting to see. It's not happening all the time, but I'm noticing it in recent sets. There's a lot of cards that say, if you cast it from your hand.
Right, because Wizards knows there's tons of ways to get stuff on the field that aren't casting it from your hand.
And also, a lot of these cards were designed with Aetherworks Marvel in mind. Even though it is now banned in Standard, you don't want to flip this off of an Aetherworks Marvel in a world where that's still legal.
Yep.
So there's just in the last set alone, you had Approach of the Second Sun.
Right.
Which, that has some crazy synergy with a card we'll talk about shortly.
The main issue I see for Waking Sun's Avatar is that, well, it'd be tough to mainboard him because you don't know if you're going to face another Dino deck, in which case he would be kind of useless. The main issue I'm actually thinking about for him is that he's 8 mana.
Yeah, he's huge.
Which is not that bad for a dinosaur deck considering all the ramp that you'll probably be running, but it means he has to contend with Gishath. And I think that most decks are going to, dinosaur decks especially is what I'm saying, are going to prefer mainboarding Gishath to Waking Sun's Avatar.
This I see as being not even a limited card, because 8 mana in limited is still a tall order.
Yeah.
I'd see it as a commander card for your dinosaur tribal.
Right. I mean, it does what you want it to do.
Oh, absolutely.
It says, I'm the dinosaur player, you guys aren't the dinosaur player.
Get gone.
Get gone. It's a one, anytime you see a one-sided board wipe, in Garrick's Wake sees play in Commander, because it just kills everything that's not yours, and that's, this guy, sure, he'll kill your little, give a target dinosaur haste, human creatures. But at this point in the game, you're fine with that.
Yeah.
Right? By the time he comes down. And it's honestly, it's a devastating blow. They might not be able to recover just from his trigger, right? Despite the fact that he's, a 7/7.
Yeah, if you have enough dinosaurs already, this guy is Magical Christmas Land. He wants to come down on a board where you've already Gishathed a few times and have some dinosaurs. So he comes in, clears the path for everybody.
Yep.
And then you go in. The mythics in this set, we're seeing a lot of high-cost mythics. I heard someone somewhere else say that one thing that we're seeing with this set in particular is that we're seeing the return of some mythics that aren't necessarily terrible, but they're mediocre. It's kind of a return to the original intent of mythics, which were these really, over-the-top cards.
Right.
That were not necessarily over-the-top in, an amazing broken way.
Well, but I've even heard Mark Rosewater talking about how you need sometimes kind of big, flashy cards for the benefit of new players. For a new player to open a pack, or even just an experienced player, to open a pack and say, I got this huge thing, this is incredible, kind of deal.
Because for a long time, we had sets that were just overflowing with mythics that were heavily pushed that were just too good.
And very technical, even.
Yeah.
Not the kinds of things new players might look at and say, you know, I know how this works, or synergizes, or anything like that.
Yeah, cards that were good to an experienced mind and could synergize in a way. And we had a huge overflow of those, and now we're going back to cards that are kind of, like Overflowing Insight.
I think that this set appeals to Timmy's more so than some of the other player types, which, I mean, I can't say that I'm too
Kaladesh
upset
is a
about
Johnny
that.
set, though.
Yeah.
So we're kind of swinging
Kaladesh
through.
had lots of interactions, lots of moving pieces, and now we have just...
Splam!
Bam.
Overflowing Insight. Target player draws 7 cards for 7 mana.
Yep.
And it requires 3 of that mana is blue. Sorcery Speed.
So
Doesn't get simpler than that.
It's a very pure card. It's a very pure design.
It's one of the purest designs
And
I've seen in a while.
I think if you're playing a blue deck the way blue wants to be played, this is never going to cost 7 mana. Brawl Chief of Compliance is a thing. There are other things that kind of cheapen your instant sorceries. Reminds me of
There's a card
Sanctum
in this set
that
that cheapens sorceries.
Yes. So the chances of this actually ending up being cast for 7 I see as very low. But I will say that there is another card in Standard that's going to contend with this, and that's Pull from Tomorrow. Pull from Tomorrow is an instant. You can put however much mana you want into it, and you know you have to discard 1 still, but that is more likely, I think, to see play than this, simply because it's an instant and can be done on the end of your opponent's turn.
So you're thinking that this new card might have its glory stolen by...
I think it's possible.
Card.
And I think that the decks that are in green are just going to run Irishkar's Expertise, which I could see as being a very powerful dinosaur card.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of stealing things, the next card up is the Dire Fleet Ravager. I'm already imagining altering it to look like something from Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's a 3 and 2 black for a 4/4 with Menace and Death Touch.
It's a heck of
So you have to put 2 things
creature.
under it that are going to die.
Yep.
When it enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of his or her life rounded up.
Now this is a powerful card.
Oh yeah.
And you're completely willing to lose that life because, I mean, just look at him. He's a 4/4 with Menace and Death Touch. This guy goes in a deck that attacks. This guy goes with the raid deck.
He's an orc.
Yeah.
He's an orc pirate wizard.
Right. And I mean, just the chances of him getting blocked are almost non-existent. And I mean, even if they do, they lose that many blockers for the next combat.
Yeah. He can kill up to 4 creatures.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty crazy. Now we have another very Timmy, just one card, huge effect.
The flavor card of the set, I think.
Oh, Star of Extinction. 5 mana plus 2 red, so 5, 6, 7 converted mana cost sorcery. Destroy target land. Star of Extinction deals 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker.
So this thing literally just clears the board.
It's a situation, in some ways better, in some ways worse Blasphemous Act.
So here's the thing that, and this is not the first time I'm going to mention this mechanic, but this kills your own stuff, but if you're running Dinosaurs, they can enrage off this card. Some of those triggers will be more relevant than others, but I think it's interesting how the first line of text on the card is destroy target land. You know, Red's ability to destroy land is something that's kind of been relegated to the, 4 mana slot sorcery lately, where it's either, destroy target land or, an artifact or something.
Yeah.
And those effects at 4 mana rarely see play. The best you're going to see is in Modern, which is Molten Rain, which is just a phenomenal card. This one, not only does it wipe every creature and planeswalker off the board, so no matter which strategy they're going for, if they're running Tezzeret, if they're running, you name it, it also sets them back a turn by destroying one of their lands. Even better against decks that aren't ramping, right? Because they need those lands more, I think, than decks that are able to ramp more mana into play. So, will it see play? It is 7 mana, but it does what it advertises.
Yes, Extinction. Speaking of things that are involved with extinction and death, the Death Gorge Scavenger. It's a dinosaur. This is now a rare. We are no longer looking at mythics.
Interesting that there was only 9.
Well, there's a couple planeswalkers and other things further down in the multicolored.
Yep.
So, whenever Death Gorge Scavenger enters the battlefield or attacks, so it's got that old Titan.
Got the old, at a 3-drop Titan trigger.
Yep. So he's a 3 mana, 3/2. You may exile target card from a graveyard whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks. If a creature card is exiled this way, you gain 2 life. If a non-creature card is exiled this way, he gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it can be a 4/3,
Right.
or you can gain life. It's kind of a weird Scavenging Ooze Titan effect.
Yeah, because I mean, exiling target card, it just says exile target card from a graveyard. So if you know they're going to be trying to flash something back, if you know they're going to be trying to, reanimate a specific creature, or, get back their Cyclonic Rift from the graveyard.
Or an Aftermath
right.
for standard, and he's 3 mana, so he can start eating quickly.
Right. And it gets value no matter what, right? You're either gaining 2 life or he's getting +1. Now, of course, the +1's not going to help him much on entry if you don't have a haste giver. But still,
you usually gain 2 life on the entry.
If graveyard strats end up being relevant, this will be a very solid solution for a lot of decks. Because he's just green, he's not multicolored, and he again, another very does what he advertises style card.
I see this card being an all-star in Dinosaur decks because he's a 3/2 body, so he can get in there. When he attacks, you're going to probably pump him to a 4/3, which gets him around all the 2/3s that are in the formats right now. When he enters, you're almost assuredly going to gain 2 life. You're probably never going to pump him unless there's no other option. He lets people eat cards out of the graveyard, which affects all kinds of things. It affects Delve, it affects Aftermath, it affects reanimation decks. A lot of things that this guy can do.
And it does say a graveyard. If you need to get value and they don't have one for whatever reason, if he's already eaten theirs, you can just start eating into yours.
Exactly. If you're in the weird big dinos versus the black control deck matchup we mentioned earlier, you can eat your creatures so he can't steal them.
So let's talk about Modern. As far as removal goes, he's fine because he has an on-entry effect. So he's like Rex Sage, and even if they kill it, he's already had his bonus.
Yeah.
But he does die to Lightning Bolt even once he's pumped.
He dies to all of the removal in Modern. Abrupt Decay, Path, Lightning Bolt, Dismember.
What is that, that Pyro Whip or whatever that the artifact decks run? 2 damage to all non-artifact creatures?
Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
Whip Flare.
Whip Flare, that's the one.
Yeah, he dies to everything, so I don't see him using a lot of Modern play unless there's a Modern Dinosaur deck that shows up with Collected Company, and
You might see him if graveyard strategies start, becoming even more of a problem in Modern as a pushback. But even then, I mean, he's at least a threat. It's not like 3 damage is something. It's a lightning bolt every turn essentially.
Let's look at the first of a set of cards that I am pretty stoked for.
Yes.
You could say that they have transformed my view of this set. Legion's Landing is a legendary enchantment that costs 1 white. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. When you attack with 3 or more creatures, transform Legion's Landing. This is a mandatory transform. Some of the transform cards are non-mandatory. They do say may. This one says you must.
Yep.
And it turns into Adanto the First Fort. There's a whole series of cards in Ixalan that start off as one thing, usually an enchantment or an artifact, and they transform into a land. And all the lands are pretty much, I think they're all legendary. I'm pretty sure they're all legendary. But Adanto the First Fort, you could tap it to add a white to your mana pool. And then you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So you can get vampires off of either version of this. Now, stepping back from this card in particular and talking about this mechanic, if you will. I love this mechanic because it's mana acceleration with bonus.
Yep.
You're getting something before it turns into a land, and it almost always turns into a land later.
When you need it.
And then you can get stuff out of it. Yep. Legion's Landing, you can transform it pretty much immediately. You play this in your first main phase. If you have 3 creatures, you can transform it immediately.
Yep.
So if you have 4 mana, you can spend 1 of it to play Legion's Landing. You get your vampire token. You attack with 3 creatures, you transform it, and then you can make another vampire token. This card is going to go, I think, in Soul Sisters.
It is possible.
In token decks, in Soul Sisters, because it's going to give you a creature just for 1 mana, one mana token.
Yep.
So you're automatically getting effect even if they
value.
kill it. 1 mana for a token, trigger Soul Sisters and everything else. It's a white creature, so it's good. And then you attack with 3 or more creatures, which if you're in a token deck, the odds are pretty good you can throw 3 creatures away. And then it will flip, and it has the ability to be mana or make more tokens with lifelink. And the lifelink is what Soul Sisters likes doing, gaining life.
So the one thing I see that's a little bit holding this card back is that both sides are legendary. Traditionally with white weenie decks, the last good one we saw, I would say, being in Theros, you want to be able to play just 1-drop, 2-drop, then 2 1-drops or something. You can't play Legion's Landing on turn 1 and then play Legion's Landing on turn 2 without losing at least some value.
This is true. Now, what you could do is if you had multiple Legion's Landings, you sit with them in your hand, and you transform one, use the white mana to make the next one, getting the token, then attack, flip, sack the tapped land, and you could chain them that way.
That's true. So, I mean, at least does something. And you can have, both sides out at the same time, which is nice. But yes, I think this will be a fantastic turn 1 play for the Vampire deck.
Yes, for Commander, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even in Standard, the Vampire Tribal.
And just the flavor of this card, where it shows, essentially, the Conquistadors landing and building the first fort. This set's flavor is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This set has some of the best flavor I think we've seen for a long time.
I've heard many people say it reminds them very much of the original Zendikar, that sense of exploration.
Right.
And absolutely, this is a card that...
Adanto is just a cool name.
Yeah. So the next card, which is in the same cycle, is the Search for Azcanta.
Yep.
It's another legendary enchantment. This one's 1 and a blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put it into your graveyard. Then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Search for Azcanta. So, comparing this to the previous one, there's a lot of drawbacks. Because this, you have to wait a turn to the beginning of your upkeep. You look at the top, you do look at the top card of your library. That part is mandatory. Everything else is optional. Because you may then put that card into your graveyard.
So what you have to essentially look at is what it's basically saying for most players, as far as they're concerned, is at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. It's not except instead of being able to put it onto the bottom, you're able to put it into the graveyard, which is honestly better for most decks. That
some decks, yeah.
That have some way. Torrential Gearhulk is still a thing.
Yes.
You could put instants into your graveyard expecting to play them off him later. You could put, the Aftermath cards into your graveyard. You could put even reanimation targets into your graveyard. So this card is essentially a better at the beginning of your upkeep scry 1.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Sultai Ascendancy.
Right.
But it says, then if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform it. So there's, you must look, but then you may mill, and then you may transform, but it's all steps of the trigger. So if you neglect on one part of if you neglect to transform it, you have to wait till your next turn. It's not, when you have 7 cards in your graveyard, you may transform it. You have to go through the process of resolving this at the beginning of your upkeep trigger each time to get the opportunity to transform it.
I will say, you could resolve this before a Delver trigger. If you look and, that's not an instant or sorcery, graveyard.
Pitch it. Now, what's it turn into? Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. You can tap it to add a blue to your mana pool, or you can pay 2 and a blue and tap it to look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it lets you Impulse for, admittedly, 1 more mana than Impulse. Still at instant speed. It technically is 2 more mana because it's another land. So you're paying 4 mana to Impulse.
In the right control deck, that's very doable.
Oh,
Just to have
absolutely.
a payable, investable, constant card advantage engine is very worth it in a control deck.
And don't misunderstand me. I was comparing it to the enchantment we just looked at. I think this card's amazing. In spite of the fact that you have to wait a turn, I still think that it is absolutely amazing.
And color-wise, as far as it fits into the color pie, that's very appropriate.
It's very blue.
White says value now, weenie now. Blue says value later.
Blue says I'm going to set something up.
Right, I'm going to set something up to execute on, and then that's going to help essentially fuel the engine of my deck. Whereas white says, I want creatures on the board now, so I can start attacking, so I can start doing my triggers and other things like that.
Yeah, so definitely a good card. The next one is the one of the transforming cards that I personally like the least. Arguel's Bloodfast for 1 and a black. The card itself, the enchantment actually is probably better than what it turns into in certain ways.
There's a lot of value off the
There's a lot of value but it's very risky, which is why I dislike it. I don't like taking risks.
Well, I think this belongs in a deck where you're gaining life.
But
where you have the life to pay.
Where you have optional life triggers, because if it's mandatory, it will fight you.
That's true.
So, what this card does, for 1 and a black, it's a legendary enchantment. For 1 and a black, you can pay 2 life and draw a card. It's an activated ability.
Greed, essentially.
It's greed.
Or Erebos' version of it.
Erebos' version of greed. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, you may transform Arguel's Bloodfast. The Bloodfast, not Bloodfeast. And it turns into the Temple of Aklazots. It's a legendary land. Yeah. It's a legendary land. It taps for a black, or you can tap and sacrifice a creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness.
Now, this is the first one we've looked at where the second line did not have an associated mana cost.
This is true. It's kind of like a Myron of the Moaning Well or Diamond Valley type effect. But being at 5 or less life is so risky.
Well, but your opponent's trying to help you get there most of the time.
This is true. But what this card wants...
So it's a deterrent from your opponent getting you too low.
Excuse me.
What we call killable range.
But the thing is, that what this card wants is very specific.
Yes.
It wants you to be at 5 or less life, and it wants you to, when it flips, to have a big creature that you can immediately sacrifice and try to get back into the game.
To essentially save yourself.
Yeah, because...
Now, that could prove to be very doable. I mean, we're still going to have...
Yeah.
Are we still going to have Ulamog and... are they rotating out?
I think Zendikar is rotating out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So that's too bad. But
the point being, though, is I'm wary of any card that makes you take a huge risk that requires other cards for the risk to pay off.
Right. That does help you draw into them.
Not to say that this card is terrible. I'd say of all the transforming cards, it's the one I'm most wary of because it is so risky.
This could prove to be a very powerful card in Standard.
Oh, absolutely. If you have the conditions that this card's asking for, it's fantastic because then, as long as you can continuously make big creatures, what it functionally says is your opponent can't kill you unless their board state is so much better than yours.
Right. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of investment to do that. I mean, it's just 2 mana. And in Limited, even, this would be a great card, I think, in Limited, because you could block, then sacrifice to gain the life. So instead of them hurting you, they're now essentially, you're gaining life.
Yes. And if you have a creature that's big enough to block them down and prevent the damage entirely, kill their creature.
Right.
Yeah, the payoff can be really good here, but you are absolutely being very risky because there's a lot of cards in the format. We're getting Lightning Strike that are going to capitalize on you being at 5.
Yep.
If there's 4 mana open, you have to be really afraid against a red deck to try to use this card properly.
Yes.
Because they could just double Lightning Strike you and then it's over. But that being said, again, not that it's bad, but I think of all the transforming ones...
Again, fitting that black would essentially be the riskiest card.
Yes, it likes high risk, high reward. Now, this is the second least favorite of the transforming cards, the next one we're talking about, and that's strictly because I can't put it into my Atraxa deck, which I'm planning on putting all the rest of them into, because it's the red one, the only red one. But this card, I think, is actually probably one of the most influential. Vance's Blasting Cannons. For 3 and red, legendary enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast that card this turn. Whenever you cast your third spell in a turn, you may transform Vance's Blasting Cannons. So, before we even look at what it turns into, there's a lot of decks that are utilizing Outpost Siege.
Yep.
Just for the exile and may play ability to get that card advantage in red. And Outpost Siege costs, what, 3 or 4?
3 in a red. Same
so it's the same cost, so this is strictly better than Outpost Siege, because Outpost Siege never uses the second ability.
That's true.
And this has the option to turn into something that is going to give you so much more value, because what this does is it lets you get card advantage. You don't have to transform it when you meet its condition, so you could, if you wanted, just keep the card advantage rolling.
But what it transforms into is not bad either.
And if you have more than one, and you've transformed one, you can keep the second one giving you card advantage.
Right, because it is a may transform.
It is may transform.
So this is the one where it's least of a problem that it's legendary.
Yes. So, but why this is way better than Outpost Siege is because it turns into Spitfire Bastion. You can add a red to your mana pool so it mana accelerates you, which for a burn deck, which is what I'm focusing on for this card, is not that relevant. But this lets burn end games, because for 2 and a red and tap, Spitfire Bastion deals 3 damage to target creature or player.
Yep.
So let's roll the scenario out. You've got Vance's Blasting Cannons out. It's 4 mana. If you're in a burn deck, you may have burned a lot of your hand already. This helps you by getting card advantage. So what you would want to do is you would wait until you can cast 3 spells in a turn.
Sets up nicely with Rift Bolt.
It does. If you suspend a Rift Bolt, if you exile the top card and then draw, you can get 3 spells off just like that. And then you absolutely will transform the first one. Because now that you've blown your hand in burn, it top decks consistently, but it's not super powerful.
Right.
It's going to top deck a burn spell or a land. But what the Spitfire Bastion, now that it is transformed, lets you do is, I don't care what I top deck, I don't care that I have no hand, I can send 3 damage to your face every single turn.
Yes, and if you do draw land, then that just leaves you more mana to play any other burn spells that you top deck.
Exactly. And because it's reactive, you can just draw go.
Yep.
And if they attack with something you need to shoot with the Bastion, you can shoot it with the Bastion, and if not, you shoot them in the face.
Mm-hmm.
This card is going to replace Outpost Siege in every deck that runs Outpost Siege for that reason.
So. Right, I would say
There's no reason not to.
I mean, unless you're planning to, what I think, combo with the second part, which is the deal 1 damage to target creature or player when a creature you control leaves the field. I mean, it's somewhat relevant, but not
the burn decks
very much.
Don't use it for that purpose ever.
Not at all.
So I think Vance's Blasting Cannons is going to be a strict upgrade.
Yeah, I really like this card. And I like the fort that it turns into, too.
Oh,
It
yeah.
looks very nice.
Yeah, really, really nice. The next one is the one that is already pre-ordering at the time of this filming for $20. Growing Rights of Itlimok.
Yep.
Legendary enchantment for 2 and a green. When Growing Rights of Itlimok enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
So in a creature-based deck, essentially cantrips.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform, mandatory, Growing Rights of Itlimok. It turns into Itlimok, Cradle of the Sun. Add a green to your mana pool, or add a green to your mana pool for each creature you control.
Really helps you push those dinos out there.
It's a strictly better Gaia's Cradle, because if someone board wipes, you could still tap it for a green mana.
That is true. I mean, Gaia's Cradle, you don't have to wait for it to transform at the beginning of the end step, so you could essentially do what you're wanting to do this turn. But as far as Standard is concerned, this is extremely playable, and I think we'll see tons of play.
Yeah, and the comment basically says it's a new version of Gaia's Cradle that costs mana and has a condition, but then it helps you meet that condition. So this is for Commander. Both of these are going in the decks.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because it's a card, as like all the other ones, they're mana ramp with bonus.
Right.
That's the other main thing to consider with this.
And I'm very excited to see Gaia's Cradle in Standard, honestly. It paves the way for lots of Timmy strats that have been absent lately.
Oh yeah. Alright, keeping on through the rares. The Bishop of Rebirth. It's a 3/4 with Vigilance. Whenever it attacks, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost of 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
So people are comparing this as a smaller Sun Titan. It doesn't do it on entry, but it does have Vigilance still, and whenever it attacks, you can get value off it. Now, I see this going most in a black-white vampire weenie deck, where you have the small creatures that you're wanting to get back. And, of course, there are lots of those coming up that we will see soon.
Yeah.
What I really like about this card is it gives the weenie deck a way to stay in the game once their threats have been dealt with.
Yeah. It's a 3/4, so it's got a decent power. It survives Lightning Strike.
Yep.
That has to be relevant now.
It probably wouldn't survive a what's the one in red burn spell from Kaladesh where you spend energy?
Yeah.
That's still of course
out there.
going to be very popular.
Now, a card that's going to be crazy popular is the Fleet Swallower, or the Devourer of Fleets. We don't have the English version, but the Italian says Divoratore di Flotte, which sounds like Devourer of Fleets to me, but the English translation I see here is Fleet Swallower. It's cost 5 and 2 blue for a fish. Whenever Fleet Swallower attacks, target opponent puts the top half of his or her library into his or her graveyard, rounded up.
Yep, so if you're familiar with the sorcery Traumatize, which does a similar, if not identical effect, this guy lets you do it every turn.
I think Traumatize is rounded down, though, I think.
Is it?
It
Oh.
might be. But what's terrifying is there's an enchantment in Standard that's already made mill an archetype again in Modern, and that is
Frayed Sanity.
Frayed Sanity, or Fraying Sanity. It's an enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, it's a curse enchantment, so the cursed player, however many cards were put into that player's graveyard from anywhere, that player puts that many into their graveyard again.
Yep.
So this guy, because he's a 7 mana card and the curse is only 3, you drop the curse on turn 3. And assuming you do nothing else
other than control
to their library, assuming that you just survive, then you drop the fish, attack with the fish doesn't even have to connect, just has to attack,
right?
And the rest of their library's gone.
Yep. Seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, just a 1-2 punch. We're absolutely going to see this, I think, in Simic, because the green is going to be used to ramp into the Devourer of Fleets, or the Fleet Swallower, whatever it actually is. The green's going to be used to ramp into it, and the blue's going to be the win conditions.
It depends, I think, on how fast the format ends up being. I think this is one of those things where it could be too expensive to see play, considering it's not a dinosaur in the dinosaur deck, which would also be the expensive deck to play. It is possible that its cost will be prohibitive, but it's still also possible that it could see play.
I see this card being a finisher for the control deck. Because if there's going to be a control deck, and we have some good counter spells now, we have Cancel, we have Disallow, we've got some really good counter magic, we've got some good hand control with Duress back again.
And of course, all that gets better with the Titan, the blue Titan.
Yeah, so
not Titan.
The new Titan.
Yes.
So we have a good control deck right now, the makings of, I think, and I think this is going to be the finisher because the control deck wants to deny you resources.
Yes.
And depending upon the matchup, there's some good graveyard stuff out there, but there's not like a Dredge graveyard heavy Reanimator deck per se, unless they're running the one Mardu Gearhulk Reanimator thing.
Right.
Which I don't know how viable that's going to be after rotation or not. But the point being is, denying resources is always good. Milling library is always good. So the curse is a good card,
and
this will finish them off.
What you have to think about with the viability of some of these new cards is a lot of the things that might otherwise answer them could be rotating out. A lot of what's shaping our standard meta right now is
Grasp the Darkness.
Yeah, the two blocks essentially that are going to be disappearing. A lot of those cards still seeing play to this day.
Yeah.
As removal or anything else. So we are actually losing a number of things that would otherwise stop these new incoming threats.
Yeah. Alright, let's have a peek at the next card, which is Sword Point Diplomacy. It is a 2 and a black sorcery. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card into your hand unless any opponent pays 3 life, then exile the rest.
This is a very interesting card draw spell.
I don't see it working in Commander at all.
No, we've already seen that Browbeat does not work in Commander.
You pay 3, you pay 3, you pay 3. Okay, get them all out of here. So,
and the rest are exiled, so you don't even get graveyard value off of it.
But if in the 1v1, that could be 9 life to make those cards go away.
Which is honestly too much. So the way I see this playing out is most of the time your opponent's going to be willing to pay 3 life just to get the worst of them gone.
Yeah.
And then you get the other 2. So if you think of this as a 3 mana draw 2, your opponent loses 3 life, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Because, typically with effects like this, you would have to be the one paying life.
Yes.
But this one makes your opponent pay.
The black has finally figured out that we can make our opponent pay life.
And if your opponent doesn't want to, well then you get 3 cards for 3 mana, which is just phenomenal.
Yeah, this card's going to be good. I think there's going to be a control deck using black. I think we're going to see it. Alright, then we have the Redoubled Volley, which is a 1 and 2 red sorcery. It deals 3 damage to target creature or player.
But here's where it gets really good.
Raid, 3 and 2 red. Return Redoubled Volley from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you attacked with a creature this turn.
Now, of course, that's very expensive.
It's a crappy version of whatever that crossbow bolt thing from Kaladesh was. That was the really bad lightning strike.
I thought this was
really bad lightning bolt
at first.
Yeah. But you can pay 5 and get it back if you attacked.
It's not great.
If it was an instant speed,
yes, that would be
better. But it's a sorcery, so
right.
Realistically, you're going to
I could see this
post-combat pay 5, which means you're probably not doing anything else, and then you're going to have to wait next turn to fire it pre-combat, and then you won't be able to do it the next turn, or the second main phase. So, unless you've got 8 mana to fire it off in the main and then get it back every turn just for 8 mana to get 3 damage extra a turn.
It's basically how I see this card is it's a limited card that gives you something to do with your mana if you run out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely more for limited, just to, that extra bit of get there.
Right. Which, 3 damage to the face every other turn is not necessarily bad.
Now we start getting into some more cool dinosaurs, the Ripjaw Raptor, which I think is going to see a lot of play.
If I'm being honest, I think this is the best dinosaur in the set. I think that, above all the mythics, above the 8 drops, 7 drops, 9 drops, I think this is the premier dinosaur in Ixalan.
Because it hits that magic number. It's not legendary.
Yep.
It costs 4 mana. It's a 4/5 with a pretty decent ability.
Yes.
And that decent ability is, it's no Siege Rhino. No one panic. But it has Enrage, so whenever it is dealt damage, draw a card.
Yes. And that's
so you swing in with a 4/5, they block to prevent the damage, you get another card, which could be another Ripjaw Raptor.
And if they
dinosaur.
double block it to kill it, that's 2 cards. Because it's just whenever it is dealt damage from any source. Your source, their source, a source, board wipe, or damage board wipes, anything. Honestly,
cards.
You could send 3 damage at it every turn with that card we just looked at, and generate some card value there.
All right,
Very
let's look at
expensive.
the last monocolored rare, and then we'll skip down ahead to look at the mythic and rare multicolors and other things. We have Maverin Fane Dusk Apostle. It's a 2/2 legendary vampire cleric for 2 and a white. Whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink.
Well, I mean, it's not bad.
He's a terrible commander for vampires because he's mono white.
Yeah, that would definitely, and he specifically refers to vampires you control. So he would have to.
And
you'd have to use
non-token.
only ones.
Now, if you throw him into a vampire deck, like if you throw him into a vampire deck that runs white, like Markov or any of the other ones, okay, yeah, that's some business.
So what I like about this guy is he does give you essentially free value every turn that you don't have to pay for, and then every turn you get that token to swing with for the next turn. So I mean, unless they block something that's going to prevent damage to itself, you're getting life every turn.
Yeah.
Because you can always have essentially that token to swing with. He never has to attack if you just want to hold him back and keep him safe. He's essentially almost like an enchantment, really, that can attack to satisfy his own condition if you need him to.
Yeah.
And then he just keeps creating them. I mean, think of him as an Ophiomancer, almost, where it makes the token all the time. And, I mean, the vampire deck, it looks like, wants to be attacking.
Yeah.
So, honestly, pretty fitting for the vampire deck.
All right, let's scroll down a little bit and we'll address the other cool stuff in the room. We're looking at some more mythics now. There are 6 multicolor mythics.
Oh, was that the last of the rares?
That was the last of the monocolor rares.
The last of the monocolor rares. Okay.
So now we're looking at multicolored, and then we're going to check artifacts. Vraska Relic Seeker. We have 3 planeswalkers in this set. We have Jace, Vraska, and Huatli, which we'll get to in just a moment.
Yep.
Vraska Relic Seeker is pretty good. She's 4 black-green for a 6 loyalty planeswalker. So she has loyalty equity, which is always something you like in a planeswalker. Her +2 creates a 2/2 black pirate creature token with menace. So in a vacuum, she protects herself.
Right.
And
the menace, again, the pirate deck wants to be attacking.
Yes, absolutely.
The vampire deck and the pirate deck, I mean, it's interesting how they've found different ways for each of the tribes to want to attack.
Yeah.
You know, they've given the Merfolk unblockable or some variants of it, you know, with the river
Counters
guys,
and things.
or draw cards when they hit. Every tribe in this set has different reasons for wanting to get in there.
Yeah.
For the dinosaurs, it's enrage. For the vampires, it's lifelink. For the pirates, it's they want to kill you.
And it fits the flavor of all of these factions are vying for trying to find the Golden City.
Yes.
So,
Which, if that's one of the transform cards next set, I will be very happy.
oh, we already have Vraska.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay.
So her -3 on Vraska Relic Seeker. Destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We've mentioned treasure before. It's the first time we've addressed it in this review. It's a gold token. It's what it is. It's a gold token. But it's
There's
treasure
a lot
now.
of things that synergize with it, too.
Oh, yes.
Tons of stuff that lets you
Tons
set
of stuff that
treasures,
involves
make treasures, and it's a way for any color to ramp.
And it fits thematically with the card, Relic Seeker. I'm going to shoot this thing that you have, and look at this treasure that I found.
So let's talk about what I think, before we get to our -10, what I think is the best thing about Vraska is her loyalty.
Yes.
She comes in with 6. If you +2 her right off the bat, that's 8 loyalty. That 8 loyalty is to the point where aggro decks look at that and say, I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm just going to go face.
Gishat can't even one-shot it.
She can't even be one-shot by literally the king of the dinosaurs, right? Her loyalty gives her such high toughness, essentially, that killing her is going to be very difficult.
Yes.
And most decks are just going to not bother, especially since she makes a blocker to protect herself.
Well,
which means that her -3, just whenever you need it, is just, it doesn't have to be tapped, nothing, just her -3 is incredibly
That
good.
is true. Now, I will say, now that we're going to look at her -10, I would normally agree with you. However, decks are going to attack her because she starts at 6. She has +2, +2 again, and then ult at -10. And you're going to want to race to that ult with her because her -10 says target player's life total becomes 1.
So huge payoff for any kind of control deck or any deck that's going to have blockers out for. Because once your life total becomes 1, and then they have a menace creature on the field, that's scary stuff right there. I mean, you would need to flip some kind of weird enchantment that lets you sack creatures to gain life equal to their toughness to get out of something like that. So yeah, it's a game ender. I mean, she's a callback to the times when if a planeswalker ulted, that essentially won you the game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how Domri Raid was. That's
Chase
how a
the
lot
Mind
of
Sculptor.
Chase the Mind Sculptor, a lot of the Sorens. It used to be with the older planeswalkers, the super powerful ones, right? That once that planeswalker ulted, it was essentially game over. In more or less words, right? And with her, your life total becomes 1. Now, if they're running Axis of Mortality, maybe not the best idea, but super powerful card. I fully expected to see tons of play in Standard, even at a competitive level.
Oh yeah, it's 6 mana, so it's at that golden range of not being way too crazy expensive.
So James, since I know you particularly enjoyed the Golgari, what easily does she slot into Golgari commander decks?
Well, she makes a creature, so Golgari like having creatures to do things with.
To sacrifice.
She blows stuff up, target artifact, creature, or enchantment. She deals with everything but another planeswalker.
Yep.
And inadvertently, she deals with a planeswalker by making a menace 2/2.
Yep. Or getting rid of a blocker that they were relying on.
Yeah, so she can deal with any permanent type.
Except for land,
Yeah, except land.
They got a Glacial Chasm out there.
Yeah, but I mean, you deal with that by making them go, your life total is 1.
Yeah, yep.
You want to pay for that Glacial Chasm? Bruh!
Good luck.
So, oh yeah, she's absolutely going to slide right into my Atraxa deck. And my Atraxa deck isn't Planeswalker heavy, it only has like 6. But she's going in there, because, yeah. And it's very similar to the previous Vraska. Her ult was very much, this game is gonna end unless you have some way to get out of this.
Right, some magic sauce.
And this is actually even more, I think, threatening than the 3 assassins with,
Yeah. I mean, that was certainly, when you
Fate
saw that,
on
you were
them.
like, oh no. But I feel like this is just kind of better in more circumstances.
Shock.
Yeah.
Spark Jolt. So let's have a look at the next Planeswalker, who is, admittedly, I don't think as good as Vraska in some ways.
Well, because she's not as good doesn't mean she's not going to see tons of play from all sorts of dino lovers.
Hotly Warrior Poet is a 3 red and a white, 3 loyalty Planeswalker, so that's kind of the...
5 mana for 3 loyalty is a bit... But
It's a bit lackluster.
We'll explain more on that in a minute.
So, her +2, you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So,
It's not bad.
5 mana to gain life actually is not that great of an ability.
What?
If that's what you're doing with it, if she doesn't live.
She's not... Okay, so here's the thing. She gets played, I think, in a deck where you already have blockers to protect her.
Yeah.
And so her plus doesn't need to protect herself as much. And if you really, really need to protect her, that's where her second ability comes in.
Yeah.
Her +2, I think, is to give the bigger, go huge dino decks, essentially, time to crunch out the game, right? Because if you think about it, not only do the dinosaurs need to ramp, but they need to live long enough for their dinosaurs to win them the game, right? If they're going up
they
against,
have to turn sideways, which leaves you less blockers.
If they're going up against, a mono red deck where they've got, 12 1-drops and, and like 12 2-drops and they're just swing, that's a problem. Even for a dino deck, because they just haven't, they can't block with their mana dorks because that slows down their strat. And so they just need time to get their dinosaurs out. And I think she gives them the time they need.
Incubation,
which is to say,
if you will.
You get your first threat out there, you get your first 4-power, 6-power threat out there, and then you are able to stabilize and stop bleeding out so much. So
yeah. Now her 0 does create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample.
And honestly, that's, I mean, the closest thing we can compare that to in Standard recently is Gideon. Gideon was a 4 mana, his 0 made a 2/2. She's a 5 mana, her 0 makes a 3/3 with a more relevant creature type, I would say, than Allies ended up being in Standard. Everyone was kind of, hoping Allies, was excited for Allies, but then they didn't really, get there competitively.
I mean, you had the rally decks.
Right.
But
I could see her making a 3/3 relevant creature type with Trample seems pretty nice.
Now, her -X, though. Hotly Warrior opponent deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Creatures dealt damage this way can't block this turn. This does a lot more than it looks on the surface in a Dino deck.
And it's a callback to Aurelia's Fury as well.
Yes. So what it does is you -X her, so you can ult her right away.
Mm-hmm.
So you could pay 5 mana, -3 her, put ping, ping, ping on 3 of your dinosaurs, enrage 3 of your dinosaurs for some kind of an effect.
It is true, yes. Or you could even kill if they have like a 2/1 or a 3/1, something like that.
And honestly, I think the best situation for dropping her and ulting her immediately would be if you had a certain dinosaur that we haven't talked about, which is the one that whenever it is dealt damage, you get a basic land into play tapped.
Right.
If you had 3 of those out for some reason, you ult her, ping, 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 now you're probably in Gishath territory.
Yep.
You're probably in the territory of the Sun's Avatar and being able to play your truly big stuff.
So, here's the thing. On turn 5, when she comes down, she's probably going to 0. Or turn 4 if you've ranked. Later in the game, it's more likely that when she comes down, she'll +2. And when relevant, she'll -X. Now, -X can get rid of some of their smaller creatures, but also, her ultimate being X gives you a lot of control over what you do with it. You could do 1 to yours to trigger Enrage, 2 to theirs to kill like a 3/2 or something. But the thing is, the more you plus her, the more her ultimate becomes a problem for your opponent. Because if they know that if they just allow you to sit there plussing her, that's more and more of their board you can affect over time.
I would actually say when you put her down, you're almost always going to plus her. The 0, I think, would be just if you have an empty board in a vacuum to try to keep her alive. But even then, that's risky. I think you're going to want to take her up to 5 so that then that ult...
That's kind of safety range.
The thing about any Planeswalker with an ult or an -X ability is you have to respect that ability could fire any time they untap with it.
Yep.
So you could go, I could play her now and ult her for 3, or next turn I could ult her for 5, or next turn it could be 7, 9, 11, and you could just sit there, and I honestly would see her being just a passive thing that sits in the back and goes, do I have a creature? I'm going to gain life off of it, and then just not do anything else until I need to pull the trigger.
Right.
And
so
clear the board out.
The thing is, she doesn't draw you cards, and she doesn't ramp you.
No.
So for a dinosaur deck, she's kind of interesting, but I still think that she can see play.
Yeah, I think her 0 is probably the ability that we're going to see the least, because it doesn't help her other 2 abilities at all unless you don't have anything in play, in which case you're already struggling.
Well, but it would be easier to do that if they also didn't have anything in play. Maybe say you're up against a control deck, or say, they're not, their deck isn't, you've dealt with the small threats they've already put out, or you've made trades. If you drop her into an empty board where neither person has creatures, I could see you zeroing to then +2 the next turn.
Yeah, I think the 0 is probably going to be in a situation where you are putting her down into, at least in your case, you having an empty board.
Right.
Or you being creatureless is when you're going to 0 her the most.
I think, but honestly, I think I agree with your initial assessment that the people who are playing Vraska will be happier playing her than the hotly players might be playing her.
Yeah.
As far as like the value you're going to get off this card.
You're going to get value anytime you do anything with Vraska. Right. You're either going to functionally win the game, you're going to take care of a threat, or you're going to be threatened.
Yeah. So again, that's why she has to come in with such low loyalty, is because her ultimate is -X.
Yeah, she threatens a high thing.
Right.
Now we have Vona, Butcher of Magan, which is a much better vampire commander.
I love this card.
It's 5 mana of 3 in Orzhov for a 4/4 Vigilance lifelink. You can tap and pay 7 life. Destroy target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only during your turn.
So
it is instant speed, but it's locked to your turn.
Right. So if you're playing Mardu, you could play this and Huatli to gain yourself a bunch of life. This, in my opinion, is the payoff for life gain decks. When you're gaining life, you want essentially that to further you winning the game, right? Not just delay your opponent from winning it. This guy lets you take all that life you're committing to gaining off the vampire lifelink triggers, off all that stuff, and say you have something to do with it. And not only that, but he has vigilance and lifelink, so you attack with him, and
gain 4.
Gain 4.
So you're paying 3 life.
Right, and you can still tap him at any time. Their turn, your turn, mid-combat if you had to,
Well, no, you can only tap him on your
right, sorry. You can only tap him your I didn't miss that part.
Yeah.
But still, 7 life to destroy target non-land permanent in a deck where almost every card is gaining you life. Very doable.
Yeah. Now we have the card that many people are very, very excited about.
Yes.
Admiral Beckett Brass.
Beautiful art, by the way.
Yes. I don't know if you read anything about the art. The artist said that they've been waiting a long time to do this card. Not this card specifically, but if you look at the art carefully, I didn't realize this upon first glance, the art is actually, Admiral Beckett Brass is actually a woman.
Yes.
And the artist said they've been waiting a long time to put their grandmother on a card.
Ah, I did not know that.
So, it's pretty cool. But Admiral Beckett Brass is a godsend to ye scallywags everywhere, because she's a legendary human pirate with Grixis colors, which covers all the pirates.
All the pirates. Not to mention Mr. Bolas that we just saw not too long ago.
And she's 4 mana, Grixis and 1 for a 3/3. Other pirates you control get +1/+1.
There it is.
Pirate Lord.
Pirate
Lady.
Lord.
At the beginning of your end step, gain control of target non-land permanent controlled by a player who was dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates this turn.
What people tend to forget, and I say this as a commander player, what people tend to forget about steal effects is that they are spot removal.
Yes.
If you are playing Treachery as a 5-drop enchantment to take control of something, that's essentially the same as destroying that creature, because you've now taken it away from your opponent. So what she says is, if your pirates are doing what pirates are supposed to do, if they're menacing, if they're unblockable-ing, if your pirates are pirating and pillaging and looting, you now get to start
Pillaging and
pirating and looting. So the flavor, the art, the fact that it's 4 mana, everything about this card just works, I think.
I kind of wish you had brought your print for this next one to demonstrate. Yep. We went to Grand Prix DC, and we had a gay old time. And this gentleman picked up a print by the artist of Gishath's son's avatar. I'm going to let you take this one away.
So, I can't tell you how excited I am for this card. This just does so much for me as a person that it's really quite unbelievable. For those who don't know, I've been trying to make Naya Beasts viable in Commander for some time. It's very doable. You know, you've got the Elemental Beast, Marath. You've got a Gihiji, Honored One, but you don't have any beasts, really, other than like Krosan Warchief, that care about beasts. Despite the fact that there's like 800 beasts in Magic, if I recall correctly. But then you get to Gishath. And Gishath is a dinosaur that cares about dinosaurs. And that's what you really need to look for in a tribal commander. This is a tribal commander that's so over the top that he could actually see play in Standard, right? He's 8 mana, so, you know, we haven't seen an 8 mana card that people have wanted to play, I think, since Avacyn.
Yeah.
And granted, Avacyn does a little more, maybe, for most people than Gishath will. But he's everything that a top-of-curve dinosaur deck wants to do. Whether that's Commander, whether that's Standard, whether that's Modern. If he sees playing Modern, someone's not running enough Path to Exile. But no. Okay, so enough of my fanboying. Let's actually read what the card does, because that might make things make a little more sense. So he's 8 mana, 5 in Naya colors, so 5 in a red, green, and white, 8 mana, for a 7/6. Here comes the keywords. Trample, Vigilance, Haste. Now here's the thing. If this card did not come with haste, it would not be half as good as it is. And here's why. When Gishath, Sun's Avatar, deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. Put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yes. There's a giant Y, an E, and an S. Because, yes. This card is
the timmiest commander you've ever seen.
The timmiest card that anyone's ever made. And it is so exciting because it's good. Because if they don't take it seriously, because if they don't answer it, this will win you the game, right? This will, I mean, you know, of course, there's always going to be ways to stop stuff. You can board wipe, you can, in Commander, there's Cyclonic Rift, right? And in Commander especially, the fact that he can come back every turn and keep doing that.
As long as you have the mana, which if you're ramping hard enough to get him out quick,
right. So,
he'll be back.
Gishath is interesting, because Gishath wants you to do two things. He wants you to run dinosaurs, and he wants you to run enough ramp, dinosaur or otherwise, which probably most ramp's going to be non-dinosaurs, if we're being honest, to get you there, right? So then, off his trigger, you have to kind of separate out the land, the potential removal you might be running, any fight spells, and the ramp. So the land, the ramp, and the removal. All of those have to get cleared away, because he only prioritizes dinosaur cards, right? But he does essentially reward you for playing dinosaurs. Now, here's the best part about him. Reveal that many cards from the top. So if you give him double strike, if you pump him with a, you know, +3/+0, any kind of, you know, effect like that.
Or if you give him Death Touch.
Or if you give him Death Touch, right? In Naya colors, very, very common tactic. No, he essentially, it's fun because he's red and green and white all at the same time. He's got the trample in green, the vigilance of white, the haste in red, kind of the randomness of all three in a way playing together to where, you know, he's got the green aspect of creatures coming into play. He's got, you know, the red aspect of you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get. Anyway, I could go on and on, but here's my final verdict on Gishath. He is the top of curve the dinosaur decks are after. If you're committing yourself to a dinosaur deck, if you're committing yourself to 5-drop, 6-drop, 7-drop creatures, Gishath is the top card that dinosaur decks need to make everything underneath of him work, I think. Because I think that it's very difficult for a deck that says, I'm going to devote all these resources to cheapening my dinosaurs and making them more playable, to then get to the end, their end strategy, and just have nothing. But he gives you something to reward all of that hard work. Mm-hmm. And essentially kill your opponents.
And the only dinosaur I've really seen that doesn't synergize with him is the Awakening Sun's Avatar.
Right. Or the other, yeah.
Here's the thing. You don't have to, if you flip a Awakening Sun's Avatar off his ability, you don't have to put it into play.
You don't have to.
You can tuck it.
Is it a Yume?
Yeah, it says put any number.
Any number of dinosaurs, right.
Yeah, so you don't have to do that one. You could just put him away, maybe tutor him up later, or do whatever you need to do. Alright, next.
Barring his trigger, if you trigger and you reveal no dinosaurs, you still have a 7/6 with Trample, Vigilance, and Haste. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the goal is to trigger him, but...
I mean, you do have to reveal.
Right.
So if you're fishing for a removal spell, it can work against you.
It can. Yeah, there are certainly... But I mean, at that point, I think you have a threat that they now have to deal with.
Yes.
Because if they don't deal with him... Now, of course, the guy, the Vampire Knight we just mentioned, could just blow him up. But, not on your turn. Both Vraska and the Vampire Knight can only kill him on their turn once he's already had the chance to attack again. Mm-hmm. Which is why I stand by my that even more than Trample, Haste is his most important ability.
Yes. Absolutely. And Vigilance, because then he could be a 7/6 defender going, come at me, bro. Alright, now we have another commander that is reminiscent of a very popular commander, but slightly different.
Yeah.
Tishana, Voice of Thunder. It's a legendary Merfolk shaman. Tishana, Voice of Thunder's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size. When Tishana enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control. Very similar notes to Prime Speaker Zagana, but Prime Speaker Zagana wants to have one big creature. Tishana wants to have a lot of creatures.
There is some disparity in green with regards to which one it runs. You have cards like Soul's Majesty and Rishkar's Expertise that both say draw cards equal to the power of, but then you also have, of course, Collective Unconscious and Shamanic Revelation, to where, there are certain green cards that say, hey, you're playing a bunch of creatures, draw some cards. And then there are other green cards that say, hey, you're playing a really big creature, draw some cards. Whereas Prime Speaker is, granted, a little tough to cast because of her 2 green, 2 blue, and rewards a single big creature. This is the one that says, you've got a bunch of Merfolk, let's reward that.
Yeah. And I think, she costs 5 green blues, so her mana cost is less intensive, but it's bigger.
And her power and toughness is more relevant to her ability in the same way that Prime Speaker Zagana's power and toughness
Also, her power toughness, unlike Zagana's, is changeable.
Yes.
That is something to consider. Now, she does give you the benefit of having no maximum hand size.
Very nice.
And so it's hard to, I'm not sure, like you said, I think I perfectly agree, they're very different directions in what green-blue likes to do.
Right.
And I'm not going to say one's better than the other because it's apples and oranges, I think.
Yeah.
They do very similar things, but along very different lines.
I run both in my mono green commander decks. I run cards that draw cards off a number of creatures, as well as cards that draw cards off a power of creatures.
Because you're not sure what you're going to get.
Right.
Alright, now we're looking at multicolored rares.
Oh, one more thing about Tishana, though. She is a very good commander.
Yeah,
Because and the reason for that being that she's an ETB. Once she hits the field, even if they kill her, she's already done her job. And she's expensive, but think about it. If you're playing Simic and you've kind of, more or less played your hand, you've ramped, and now you have all this mana, what do you want to do with all that mana? Well, you want to refill your hand.
Yeah.
She gives you a repeatable way, essentially, to refill your hand, which is
And if you
really
give her haste and you have a big enough hand,
she could be a threat herself.
she could kill you. She could kill somebody.
I mean, at the very least, she's a phenomenal blocker.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say something with her.
In Standard, she's a little expensive.
Yeah, I don't know about her for Standard because how many creatures are you going to get in Standard without something like an Avenger being in play?
Once you get to the point where you have 5-6 Merfolk to essentially draw off of her, your opponent's going to want to have tried to do something about that. Now, whether or not they actually succeeded, but, that's when the board wipes start coming out. That's when the blocks,
Various
the
things.
trades, the, whatever means they need to reduce the size of your board comes into play. But... not bad for a free hand.
Alright, we have 2 more multicolored rares, then we'll get to the artifacts. The first multicolored rare is the Regisaur Alpha.
I thought it was Regisaur, but I could be wrong.
But other dinosaurs you control have haste. It's a 4/4 for 3 red-green. When Regisaur Alpha enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample.
Other dinosaurs you control have what?
Haste. It's 7 power for 5 mana.
Divided across 2 bodies, which makes it harder for removal spells to kill.
And it gives 3 of that haste.
Here's the thing. Any card that continues to give the rest of your deck value without an additional mana cost in the subsequent turns is a card worth looking at.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a card that's like the one in the blue enchantment we just looked at, where you look at the top card, you can put it, you don't have to keep paying mana for that effect. You pay the initial investment, and then you keep getting returns off of it. This guy makes every dinosaur you play after him better.
Yes.
And immediately gives you 2 bodies on the field for 5 mana. Turn 3...
that are not small.
Yeah, turn 2 ramp into turn, 3 Ripjaw into turn 4. This is a very scary board state for your opponent to have to deal with by turn 4.
Yeah.
It's just so much. You've got a 4/5, a 4/4, a 3/3. They all have haste. They're all attacking me. I'm really scared. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Last multicolored rare, Hostage Taker. It's a 2/3 for 2 blue and black. It's a human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So it O-rings, but before they can kill it, you might be able to permanently steal it.
Right. Which, I mean, honestly, just the fact that it gets something out of the way for your pirates to get in and do their pillaging effects, phenomenal card. Very, very playable.
It's very kind of piratey because it says, "Give me that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep this."
Hey, this is cool. Yeah, I mean, you just take the biggest threat your opponent has, whether it's Dinosaur, whether it's a vampire, huge lifelink vampire, you just take the biggest threat they have and say, nah, not right now.
Alright, so we're going to look at the rare artifacts, and we're going to look at the non-transforming ones first.
Yes.
The Shadowed Caravel it's interesting. It's a vehicle. We have some vehicles in this one. I wouldn't say they're fixed, I say they're playing it. This set, they're doing some things that are in weird ways. This set's like very Timmy, but in some ways they're playing it safe.
Right.
Where I could see how this card could be better, but it seems like they toned it back.
I think they realized that they over-pushed Smuggler's Copter, and they're trying to not make that mistake again.
Yeah, because this is a 2-drop vehicle. Mm-hmm. It's a 2/2 that has a 2 crew cost, so there's lots of 2s everywhere. Whenever a creature you control explores, put a 1/1/1 counter on Shadowed Caravel.
So
this applies whether it's a creature or not.
Yep.
So you have lots of exploring. You can make this 2/2 bigger if you build around it.
Right. So crewing him for 2 to then swing with him without any counters is kind of but then what this is there to do is essentially to sit over here as almost like a Myth Realized, where Myth Realized was the more you play instants and sorceries, the bigger this gets. This is like that, except for exploration. The more you explore, your opponent starts looking, oh, that's got 3 counters on it? That's a 5/5 that they can crew for 2? It starts to be a problem.
It becomes a shadow over them. Alright, Fell Flagship is another artifact vehicle. Pirates you control get +1/+0. I like this.
That's good.
Because it's a ship that helps your pirates.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
I wish they had done this with more cards, honestly.
Yes.
More ships that cared about pirates, and more pirates that cared about ships.
Did they print a ship that gave them all +0/+1 or no?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Now, they do have a pirate that says it cannot attack unless you control an artifact. Which is like flavorful for them needing a ship.
Pirates use tools or...
No, it's like they need a ship. They're like castaway pirates.
Okay.
So they did do that flavor, but I want more things that directly correlate. So pirates you control get +1/+0. Whenever Fell Flagship deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card.
Yep. It just kind of rewards you for getting in there, attacking, punishes them for not blocking.
And just like the Shadow Caravel, it's 3 mana, 3/3, crew 3.
Now, what would have been really interesting is if it were an artifact pirate vehicle.
And here's the thing. It's crew 3, but it helps you get there.
It does, because it buffs the power of the things that you would
If you have 2 1/1 pirates, you can crew your ship.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah, it helps. If you have a 2/2 pirate, you can crew the ship.
And if you get in there with this every turn, the fact that they would have to essentially discard a card every turn would be really damaging.
Yeah, getting someone hellbent
First
quickly.
time, it's like, okay, they'll just pitch maybe a land they didn't need. Every time after that, wow.
Yeah. The Sorceress Spyglass it's interesting. It's 2 mana. If it was 1 mana, I think it would be really powerful. But it's 2 mana. As Sorceress Spyglass enters the battlefield, so not when, whenever, or if, or at, so it's not a trigger.
It's a replacement effect, right?
No, it's just a...
Oh, it's a static ability.
It's a static ability. Yeah. As Sorceress Spyglass enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Activated abilities of sorcerers with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities.
So
if this was 1 mana, it would be a strictly better Pithing Needle.
Right, because it lets you look at the hand.
It's not naming a card in the dark. It's going, I'm going to hit whatever's the most valuable either on your board or what you've got in your hand. Because you can hit something that's in play with this, but you get to see their hand to see if there's something worse.
Now, in Modern, for a variety of reasons, I think Pithing Needle is going to stay more popular.
Yes, just because it's one mana.
One mana. People know what the threats are. You know, it's kind of a more locked format in a way.
But
this, though...
like I said, if this was one mana, it would just replace Pithing Needle.
And again, this is very playable as a sideboard card for any number of decks, like control decks or things where it's like, oh, that's a problem. And don't forget that this can shut down some of the transform cards. You know, they tap for mana, but their other abilities aren't mana abilities.
I would be curious with this card to see if it will see Eternal play, especially in decks that like to interact with the opponent's hand, namely in like Legacy decks that are using Cabal Therapy. Because that one you do have to be blind, so you put this down, you Pithing Needle something out of it, then you Cabal Therapy, get something else, then Flashback Cabal Therapy, get something else, and now they're left with something they can't use.
Wow, yeah, that would be pretty devastating.
So, but again, it's the fact that will the extra mana cost prohibit that is what we'll have to see. The Vanquishers...
Well, don't forget, we are just coming out of not the most recent set, but Kaladesh was an Artifacts Matter set. We could end up seeing this in the same deck as Inspiring Statuary, to where then it also becomes a mana rock.
Possibly. It depends on how many things with... I mean, there's lots of stuff with activated abilities.
Because, I mean, just look at all these, treasure map, artifact-style things you have in here. We could see a revisiting of some of the Artifacts Matter cards from Kaladesh.
Yeah. So, the last rare before we get to the transforming ones is the Vanquisher's Banner. It's actually pretty good. 5 mana for an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type gets +1/+1, and whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card.
It's
tribal.
It's very... It rewards you, obviously, for playing the tribe, but it's not as good as the Anthem pumps, and it's a little more expensive than the other draw card effects. What this card does for you is it allows you to have both in one.
Yeah.
You don't have to expend additional slots playing, multiple anthems and then multiple card draw things, things like Elemental Bond or things like that, or, because, I mean, honestly, in most tribal decks, if you're just looking for an anthem, Obelisk of Erd is probably going to do a little more for you than this. But this gives you both and rather than either or. And
the one thing that tribal decks are soft to is like mass removal. So this is helping you keep going. It also, they're soft to not getting enough.
Yes.
So it helps you in both of those respects.
And making all your things one bigger in power and toughness is not bad.
Alright, let's look at the first transforming artifact, the Dowsing Dagger. This thing, I've heard some people say that this is going to go in Soul Sisters as well. Because it's a 2-mana equipment that costs 2 to equip. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2 0/2 green plant creature tokens with Defender, which will trigger your Soul Sisters so you'll gain some life off of it.
And they won't get any power out of it. Not
correct. Really. Equipped creature gets +2/+1, so it can kill a plant, guaranteed, anytime it goes through. And if you put on a flyer, you just forget the plant.
Yeah, forget those plants.
Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may transform Dowsing Dagger. So you can drop this, throw it on a creature, and transform it immediately.
So here's the thing. I think that with regards to strictly Ixalan, this is going to be a seriously powerful card for the Merfolk deck.
Oh, yes.
Because I think Merfolks have more means than any of the other creatures, even with Pirate's Menace, even with Dinosaurs Trample. I think Merfolk have the most evasion and the most reliable evasion, I would say, of probably any of the tribes.
Yeah.
So you could have, turn 1, Merfolk, find a way to make it unblockable, or, drop this, equip it, and then if you have a Merfolk deck that has a Lost Veil that can then ramp them into their, their legendary Merfolk or their draw 7 sorcery.
Yeah.
That's a powerful effect.
Well, let's look at this. So this card is like it's reminiscent of like 3 other cards in one. It transforms as an equipment, so it's like Elbrus the Binding Blade.
Right.
It gives them mostly useless creatures, so it's kind of like an Crowan Horse.
Yeah.
And it turns into a really good land that's reminiscent of Lotus Veil.
Or, even Gilded Lotus.
Yeah, so what it turns into is Lost Veil, which tap, add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. So let's think about the scenario here. You've paid 2 mana, you've played the Dowsing Dagger, they've gotten 2 creatures. If you're running Soul Sisters, you've gained 2 life. You pay 2 mana, you equip it to some creature with evasion. So you have, let's say, a 1/1 spirit with flying. So now you have a 3/2, you crash in for a Delver, and then it immediately flips, and you can tap for 3 mana. So you've lost 1 mana this turn. You've paid 1 mana to get 2 life, 3 damage, and a land.
It's not too bad. But can you tell me what makes this significantly different from all of the enchantments we saw earlier? It is not legendary. You could have
the land is also not legendary.
4 Lost Veils.
Ooh.
You could have 4 of them, James. 4 lands that tap for 3 mana each. Now, if that doesn't give you enough mana to get to your 8-drop whatevers, I don't know what will.
I could see maybe you doing like a weird synergy deck with early game unblockable Merfolk trying to ramp into your Dinosaurs using this.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible.
Now, there's a lot of artifact destruction.
There is. And that's on purpose because we have so many artifacts in Standard right now.
From Kaladesh.
Yep.
But, yeah, this is definitely a card to watch out for.
I would not be surprised at all to see this play at the competitive level in Standard.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of people are saying Soul Sisters.
Right.
In Modern, this will because even if you don't flip it, it turns your 1/1 spirits into Delver of Secrets.
Right.
And we all know Delver of Secrets can be a scary fast clock.
Now, what this card does have to compete with is the new Gaia's Cradle. So that could be the thing that ends up causing this Nazi play, is the more reliable or immediate value of the Gaia's Cradle. But in decks that aren't running green or have no love or have no use for it, this goes in any deck.
See, why not run both? Because the Gaia's Cradle enchantment's a 3-drop.
This is a 2-drop.
Now, if you're chaining it, you'd have to do something really remarkable on turn 1 to get the creatures to satisfy both of them. So you probably wouldn't want to sequence them quite that tightly.
Right.
But I would love to see a deck that focuses on flipping all these cool lands.
Yes.
I would love to see a deck that tries to do that. Speaking of flipping cool lands, we have the the Golden City, which comes from the thematic Compass. This is a 2-drop artifact that you pay 3 and tap. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it and put it to your hand, then shuffle your library. If at the beginning of your end step, if you control 7 or more lands, transform Thematic Compass. It's an artifact that transforms into a land, so non-legendary.
Very true.
So this is going in control decks, because what you can do is you drop this down on turn 2. Then you just start leaving mana up for your counter spells.
Yep.
And if they don't do anything worth countering, at the end of your turn, you crack 3, thin your deck out, get a land to your hand, so you get a land drop next turn.
Really,
which control decks do like getting their land so they can get more mana to counter and answer things.
Right.
So, and then at the beginning of your end step, when you control 7 or more, you flip it, and what do you get? You get the Spires of Orazca.
Another control piece.
It taps to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can tap it to untap target attacking creature an opponent controls and remove it from combat.
So,
Maze of Ith.
I mean, Maze of Ith is a beloved control card.
That you can have 4 of.
Because it essentially takes your opponent's biggest threat and says, no.
Gisheth? No.
Stop that.
No. Now, it won't stop the Implacable Death Lizard.
It does not stop the Implacable Death Lizard.
Because it is, after all,
implacable.
So, the Spires of Orazca is going to be a card that's going to be used in control decks. I really would be surprised if it's not. Just because it has the ability to basically say, no matter what else you do, your biggest threat is not a threat.
Right.
For no mana. Just, I leave this land over here, this land is a blocker that says this card does nothing.
Right. Very powerful card. And the fact that it helps you satisfy its own condition is very, very nice.
Yes. That's one thing with a lot of the transforming cards is they very much, pretty much all of them, yeah, all the ones we've seen so far, they help you satisfy their full condition.
The thing that makes this different from the Black Enchantment, the Black Enchantment said at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, flip it, and then you can sack your creatures. Right? But you have to wait until your turn. This, on the other hand, says at the beginning of your end step.
So this is automatically much better for something like Commander.
Right.
Because it's an artifact, so they have to shoot it on your turn before it transforms, or maybe with the trigger on the stack.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to turn into a land, which is a lot harder to shift.
Right.
So this card is going to see play in Commander, I think, because it's mana ramp in any color that turns into a land that's a Maze of It.
Right.
So every control deck in Commander is probably going to at least consider the thematic compass.
Right, especially because it fixes you. If you're running a 3-color control deck, you can get the basic land of whatever color you need the most.
Now we look at probably one of the more intricately involved transforming cards, the Transport of the Conqueror's Galleon. It's a vehicle that has a crew 4 cost for CMC 4. It's a 2/10. Yes, 2 power, 10 toughness. When Conqueror's Galleon attacks, exile it at the end of combat, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So you have 2 options with this half of the card.
Yes.
You can either make it be the biggest wall in this set.
Blocks everything. I can think of.
It blocks everything. Unless you have a really, really big Tishana.
Yes.
In which case, you probably don't block unless she's just going to kill you. But you can attack with it, and it's going to survive unless they throw a lot of things underneath it. And it crews 4, which is not that difficult to do.
Not really. Do that off a single Ripjaw Raptor.
Yeah, exactly. Flips it into a land, non-legendary, that is the Conqueror's Foothold.
Reminiscent of the Staff of Domination because of its multiple...
It is a Staff of Domination-ish land. You can tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool. You can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. You can pay 4 and tap it to simply draw a card. Or you can pay 6 and tap it to return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
That's value right there.
What do you want it to do?
Yeah,
it does stuff.
It gives you mana if you need mana. Otherwise, it's a mana sink that you can activate to do any number, like a few different things. Right? It gives you somewhere for all that excess mana that you may have built up to go. Mana sinks are very important in Commander because in Commander it's very easy to get to a point where you have a bunch of mana, but due to board wipes or other things, you have nothing to do with it.
I could see this being... I'm not as certain about this one for control decks as I was for the Thematic Compass, but I can see this finding a home in there because it's a 2/10, so you could block threats.
Yeah.
If you can crew it. That's really the stick, is can you crew it in a control deck?
Right.
But if you can, you swing with it, and then you get the ability to end step, pay 4, draw a card at the end of your turn, or return a good control piece or win condition from my card, from my graveyard to my hand. It lets the control deck reuse its resources.
Right.
Or even if just simply at the cost of needing that extra mana, or looting, or just drawing, whatever they need it to do.
Well, if you think about it, if a control deck in Commander gets to 13 mana, they can Cyclonic Rift on loop. And just every turn, bounce everything. Now, as for whether or not that would actually win you the game, I don't know, but it would certainly slow your opponent.
I mean, it'd help. It would help. But, yeah. And 13 mana is quite doable in Commander.
As we're well aware. From infinite mana all over the place.
I don't know what you're talking about. Now we have Primal Amulet, which I think is really cool.
We were talking earlier about drawing 7 for 6 mana instead of 7.
This is why. The Primal Amulet is an artifact that costs 4 mana. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So, pretty decent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this is where it gets interesting.
Ooh.
Put a charge counter on Primal Amulet. I'm thinking Atraxa. Then if there are 4 or more charge counters on it, you may remove those counters and transform it. So if you can fire off 4 spells, you may remove the counters, so you don't have to. So you can keep your spell discount ability if you want to, or you can transform it into the land, again non-legendary, Primal Wellspring. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. When that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell and you may choose new targets for the copy.
Beautiful.
If I'm understanding this right, and correct me if I'm wrong, it says when that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell. You don't have to.
No, it just makes 1 mana of any color, period.
And it's a non-legendary land, so not a land that taps for any color. That gives you added bonus if you're a spell mage.
Theoretically, would also kind of mean that you get to keep part of the front side, because if instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less, well, this gives you 1 mana to then pay for that, so you're not losing too much.
Yeah.
What this actually makes me think of the most in Standard right now is Baral, Chief of Compliance. Because he's, of course, a 2-drop creature that also says instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast. So if we could actually see some kind of Baral Primal Amulet Dynavolt Tower deck that wants to essentially play tons of instants and sorceries, its win con being Dynavolt Tower, Baral fixing the hand for counter spells, and then that could actually be a viable control deck.
What the Primal Wellspring does if you're using a counter spell? It kind of turns that counter spell into a Flusterstorm.
Yeah.
You copy it, and even if you're only countering 1 spell, you get 2 spells that say, I'm countering that spell. What are you going to do?
So then even if they try to counter your counter spell...
you have to counter both of my
counter spells.
Or if you're in a counter war, you go, I'm going to cast this 1 counter spell, and... Or if you overload a counterflux, now you have 2.
2 counterflux. Yes.
What are you going to do?
So, very relevant in Commander. I can't even tell you how relevant in Commander. Possibly good enough for Standard.
Yeah, I'd say
it doesn't block
the mana
you,
cost is really the stickler, because it's 4. So you have to wait till turn 5 to start ticking it up, and then it'll be done by turn 8 if you're casting 1 spell per turn.
As far as 4 goes, it has to then compete with like Panharmonicon or
other things,
Gear per Orrery, or any number of things.
Yeah. All right, the last transforming thing, which was the first thing that was spoiled.
Perhaps the most thematic and on point flavor card in the set. Star of Extinction, of course, being for Dinosaurs, but this, as a card representative of the entire set, I feel like this is kind of the shining example.
Treasure Map. It's an artifact. Pay 1, tap, scry 1, put a landmark counter on Treasure Map. Again, counters, if you have ways to proliferate.
Paying 1 to scry 1 is not a bad ability.
Yeah. Then, if there are 3 or more landmark counters on it, remove those counters, transform Treasure Map, and create 3 colorless artifact tokens with tap, sacrifice, that you get treasure tokens. So, and it turns into Treasure Cove, which you can tap to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or you can tap and sacrifice a treasure to draw a card.
This is phenomenal design.
Yes.
The pay 1 to tap and scry 1, and then the 3 landmark counters giving you 3 treasure, essentially refunds all the mana you put into it if you want to.
Yes.
Even if you don't want to, what it transforms into still gives you additional mana. So you paid 2 mana to essentially pay 3 mana and scry 3 times, get your 3 mana back,
so you paid 5 mana,
still get left with a land that taps for more mana.
Yeah, you pay 5 mana to get 4 mana.
Right.
So you're down 1 mana, but you have a land.
And it has a second benefit: tap, sacrifice a treasure, draw a card.
So if you're not hurting for land,
right?
Because the most important resources in Magic are mana and cards.
Yes.
In probably that order, because if you have cards but no mana, I'd rather have mana than and no cards than cards and no mana.
Right.
And some people might differ on that, but I would rather have the ability to cast something if I draw it than have something and not be able to play it.
So here's the thing.
This helps you do either.
This goes into any deck, really.
Oh yeah.
It's very viable. It's very bending. This is not the only card in the set that makes treasure. There are tons of cards in the set that make treasure artifact tokens. And this in a deck where other sources than just itself are making those things, incredible. Now, it does take time. You can't, you do have to essentially wait to put the landmark counters on. You can't choose to, pay one and do it again unless you have some way of untapping it.
Yeah.
So you do have to wait. But then it really, really pays off. So, as far as I'm concerned, really good card.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even the scry one that you're doing the whole time you're getting there can help you find either another land that you need or to get away from lands you don't need. Give you more action. So I think this card really does go in just about any deck. Maybe not Dinosaurs because they really want to be ramping at the 2-drop slot. Yeah. And don't want to have to wait until turn 5 for that to pay off. But think about this. If you do essentially, so say you're on turn 5, right? You're doing your 3rd scry. You've essentially paid 1 and gotten 3 treasure, and now it's transformed so you can tap it. On turn 5, you now have 8 mana for Gishath off this card, with barring any other ramp. Granted, it's a single time because you would have to expend your 3 treasure counters to do that, but assuming that he landed and hit, that might be all you need. So yeah, even in Dinosaurs, not probably going to beat out some of the other cards we have yet to talk about, but still viable.
Well, we have completed our analysis of the rares and the mythics. So tune in for the next video, which we will talk about either just the uncommons or the rest, depending on how much time we take. But I'm ThriceRisen. This is the first part of our Ixalan review. This is Jacob, and thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.